Hi. Frequently asked questions about improvisation. One frequently asked question is, do I need to learn and practice scales before I start to improvise? Well, the simple answer would be no. But the wise answer is yes. Why no? Well, of course you can start improvisation with just some basic notes from the chord, for instance, and you just can use your ear, of course. That's never a bad thing. You should always use your ear. So you can, of course, learn by ear and find out which notes you can play in a certain key. That's not a bad thing. Training your ear is also good. But it will probably not get you very far because you also need speed and fluency. The simple answer is no, you don't need to practice scales at first. But the wise answer is yes. I would definitely recommend that you practice scales as part of your practice routine. And why is that? Because if you practice the scales, it means that when you play the scales fluently, you can find the notes that you're looking for much more easily without thinking. So when you're improvising, you can find the notes without thinking about all the notes because basically the pattern of the scale is already in your fingers. So you can't really play a wrong note in that key. So let's take an example. Let's take the key of E flat. Let's play a simple loop like this. So on this I can play an E flat. Now if I would not know any scale, I would have to listen. So I'm exaggerating now, but let's say I'm playing this and I'm finding notes. Yes. I want to improvise. No, clearly that's not right. Why is it not right? Well, it's a minor interval instead of the major interval. I hear that it's not sounding okay, so I hear that this sounds much better. And I can work my way through the key and find the notes. But I have to think. Now imagine that you're improvising and you have to think and listen, and basically every time you play a note, you're not sure if you're going to play the right note. On the other hand, if you know the scale of E flat and you can play it fluently, so as long as I'm playing notes in that scale that I've practiced, I can't really go wrong. I might be playing sometimes a note that I didn't expect, but even if that happens, it will not be a wrong note. So knowing the scale makes improvisation much, much easier. So first of all, you need to learn the scale to find the notes quicker. So finding the notes faster, much faster, without thinking. And the other obvious reason to practice scales is you have to practice the technique anyway. I mean, you have to be able to play those notes at a certain speed. So practicing the scale is definitely a good start. You want to build up the technique to play those notes with sufficient fluency and speed so that you can use them in an actual improvisation. So, and I can tell you about my own experience. When I started to improvise, I was basically trying this out for myself. I didn't have a teacher at the time. And I was just trying to figure things out from recordings and listening to jazz musicians play and just trying to figure things out by myself. And I tried to improvise, and I could improvise a little bit. But then at some point I bought a book about scales. And I started practicing them, and I noticed how much easier it became to improvise. The scale is really the starting point for improvisation. So summarizing, do you absolutely need to know all the scales to start improvising? No, but I definitely do recommend that you start with some basic scales as part of your practice routine. Also, it should not be the only thing in your practice routine. You don't want to be practicing scales all the time and nothing else. That's not going to build up your musical ability. But it should be part of your practice routine, especially in the beginning. If you're not yet fluent playing the scales, you should really practice them. And the other part of your practice routine can be playing a certain song. So playing a melody of a song, playing the chords and figuring that out. You should always have different things in your practice routine so that you don't get bored, but also playing a scale is not so musical by itself, but it's still a necessary step. By the way, if you do scale exercise, I like to do it over a loop. So taking the loop that we were just playing, I can practice the scale over that. I find that to be a more enjoyable way of practicing a scale. It also helps you to keep time, to play it fluently. And by the way, when you do play the scales and you start to play some intervals in the scale, before you know it, you are actually improvising. Because if I start playing different intervals in that scale, I'm improvising. So I can make any jump and any interval because I will always land on a scale note. So therefore it cannot be wrong. And even if it's maybe sometimes not what I expected, suppose I make a very big jump and I had something in mind and I hear something different, still it will be an okay note. So I just have to go from there and continue. So it also helps to make you much less anxious about trying things and playing notes because you're using the scale, so you can't go wrong. And if you don't know the scale and you're just guessing the notes, you're going to hit the wrong note many times and you're going to get scared and you're going to get anxious and basically your whole improvisation falls apart. So, learn the scales.